Welcome to the Mindset Mirror Connection podcast. In today's episode, we talk with Dena Tibsherany with One World Empowered. We are going to discuss what a perinatal mental health professional is, how she works with clients in this huge shift of life, trauma and treatment, and creating a postpartum plan. So if you're ready, I want you to listen up and lean in because I'm about to elevate your mind. Okay, hey Dina.
Hi there.
Dina.
I know, we've got the whole crew today.
Woo!
Well, Christina's a therapist and therefore Dina's a therapist. So then I was like, okay, let's have therapy for Amanda.
Therapies.
Therapize. Let's therapize this. But
Can I tell you something really dumb about yours truly?
Okay, sure.
So I was talking to Adrienne and I said, hey, it's your 21st birthday squared. And Mark goes, what is she, 400 and da-da-da? And I was like, what are you talking about, Mark? Squared means you just times by 2. He goes, no, it doesn't. He goes, you times it by itself. And I know that in my brain, but I was like, in my other brain, my like, I'm not paying attention brain, I was like, no, squared is just times 2. And he's like, no, that's not it. I go, well, happy 429th birthday, Adrienne. That's what we're celebrating.
That's
so
why
anyways,
here.
That's why we do feelings. And that's what we're going to talk about today.
Yes. And so Dina's a great person to have on our podcast because so she's got the experience of, so Christina, where she's gotten the experience of the body image and the food disorders, where Dina's got more of this experience of working with moms leading into motherhood and postpartum. And so her and I have met. I've seen you speak on several occasions, and then we came across each other's paths at a recent networking event. So she was at Dr. Julie's networking event.
Love Dr. Julie. As all y'all listeners love Dr. Julie too. People really loved her.
She's good.
Episode.
So I thought, oh, Dina, she has a podcast. I've got a podcast. Like, let's have her on to talk about this important aspect because it's often, I feel like, overlooked for a lot of moms of kind of just like, you've got the healthy baby, you're home, everything's okay. And it doesn't have to be okay. We don't always have to feel okay. So, Dina, I want you to tell the audience a little bit about you, how you got into this work, what you're doing currently, and anything else that you think is important.
Yes. So I love what you say. It doesn't have to be okay because the reality is the majority of us, when we come home, we are not okay. We have very little skill for the amount of demand required for us when we transition in the postpartum season. We are exhausted. Our body is exhausted. We're trying to heal and we are clinically sleep deprived. And then we have to learn our baby's cues and needs and how to support them, which creates immense demand. And none of us feel okay. We don't feel like we're rocking it. We feel like we are surviving in that stage of the game, which is very common for the first couple of weeks. And so I found my way into working with moms because of my own journey. I've been a therapist since 2011. And when I had my son in 2016, I was not prepared by any means for the psychological, emotional, relational impact of transitioning into motherhood. I spent all of my energy on preparing my body. I did hypnobirthing. I had a doula. We did all the things. I had a midwife, a birth plan, everything we could to plan for the arrival of our child. We had a baby shower and got the nursery ready. And then these are all the things that are pretty typical. You do a birth class, you get ready. But then we brought our baby home from the hospital and it was just like, boom, like immediate reality shock. We spent all of our time planning for the birth in our baby's room and nesting, that we completely forgot to plan for life with our baby, which is not consumer driven. There's no items that you can buy to prepare that's going to make it better. Like it is truly relational driven and your ability to regulate and move through the hardness with your support team. And I had such a hard time. I am a high achiever, over functioner. It's hard for me to downshift. It's hard for me to face like moments of struggle or feeling like I'm not doing well in something. I usually put my mind to something and do great, right? Like that's my MO. And this wasn't something that you could just like think your way out of, or have like a book to tell you what to do. Instead, this is something like a new skill I had to navigate through, a new developmental stage I had to blossom through, and it rocked me to my core. And so that's why I shifted into perinatal mental health. I don't want people to experience postpartum anxiety or depression or OCD, which I never coupled with a postpartum experience, but it's actually pretty darn relevant and common. And so I don't want people to have to go through that or be surprised by that. And if they are going through it, I would love to be a support system for them. And so that's why I was like, I'm shifting gears here. We need some more education and preparation for postpartum.
Got it. So you
Yeah,
touched on it
absolutely.
a little bit is the symptoms of anxiety and depression and OCD. Question on
Yeah.
that. Do women tend to exhibit those types of, you guys would know this. I don't want to say disorders, but symptoms before pregnancy and then they're exacerbated postpartum, or could they just appear postpartum randomly? Or
Both.
what was your both?
It can be both. So
Yeah.
you can have these experiences in pregnancy, but I didn't have these experiences in pregnancy. They can also happen in the postpartum season. And we call it like the perinatal season that encompasses like your pregnancy through your postpartum season, that whole transition. But they can pop up at any point in time. And what's surprising and important to know is just because you may be feeling great at like 1 month or 2 months postpartum emotionally, they can pop up at 7 months. They can pop up at 9 months, right? Like this whole time period is a time period where we see statistically a lot of people reporting symptoms of anxiety or depression or recognizing that they have symptoms of trauma.
Oh,
Yes. I
interesting.
think that's a great transition, because we handle a lot of women who suffer from their own, we'll call it, there's big T and little t traumas that we see, majority of them more little t, just, interrelational trauma around their self-worth. And just our definition of trauma for our clients is anything less than nurturing or anything that was shaming to them, right? So if we think about that, it's pretty broad in regards to that. How does, trauma, early childhood, or even just trauma throughout the life prior to baby, how does that affect these outcomes?
Good
Yes,
question.
so it is a great question. A lot of people who have a history of trauma feel like in the postpartum season, or so it depends on your personal experience. How was it for you getting pregnant? Do you struggle with fertility struggles? Have you had previous losses? That can really compound the trauma.
Yes.
And then when you give birth, you realize you actually don't have control. Like we can create preferences for our birth, and have like a vision, but the reality is we don't have control. And you experience that very fine line of like having one foot in reality and then the other foot in the, oh my gosh, the rest is just up to fate. Like as you're in that transition of giving birth. But people who have a history of trauma are more at risk for experiencing perinatal mood and anxiety disorders.
That makes so much sense. No, I'm going to be completely honest. I am not skilled in like postpartum. That was not my focus, but I am in trauma, and just that word out of control, because we know, and this is the way I explain it to my clients, is anything that looks like, sounds like, smells like, feels like that, that bad thing that happened to you, and control or lack thereof can be such a big part of trauma, right? And so that makes, like, when you said that, I was just like, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense to me, because you're exactly right. I think that's really important for mothers or people who wish to have children to know, because that's even more reason to do some of that trauma work ahead of time.
And we have to like practice, how can we learn to safely surrender? Like, what do we need around ourselves to promote comfort so we can surrender when there is a lack of control and we don't have to nosedive into like panic? But we can be like, okay, this isn't going as planned. I'm noticing that I'm getting anxious and nervous, but like I have my partner here with me and they're not going to let this slide. Or I have my doula here with me who's my advocate and it's going to be okay, right? Like we have, what safety net are we building around us that we can relax into when we have to surrender? Because motherhood forces you into the reality of almost everything's out of your control. Like I birthed my baby and then I was like, oh shoot, like you were safe in there and now you're out here and all of these problems are coming up. Like, oh, like I really, this is a lot. I don't have all the control anymore. I have to surrender around some of these.
Yeah. And I feel like that compounding on top of I feel a bit of out of control. And also I have this human being to take care of, and the stress of that. I mean, I can just imagine that it can, like you said, the word is just be so overwhelming.
Yes.
So in that case, and you're talking about the support system, when would you suggest someone reach out to someone like yourself through that perinatal process?
So planning ahead of time is key. Anytime in the season of pregnancy, it's not too late. You may be like, oh my gosh, I'm due in a month. If you need support in planning and preparing for the postpartum season, do it. Don't think that it's too late. Start planning now because I like to tell you there's 7 key factors. If we look at the science of epigenetics, we know the things that we can control that we can promote to support our emotional and physical and relational well being. And so, building on those factors helps support us in preparing for what's ahead. And so, that's
Mm-hmm.
how I break down the course that I created, the Empowered First Year. It's a course that you take while you're pregnant with your support system, your partner, or whoever's going to be there with you in your postpartum season. And you build those protective factors together in a workbook, and you walk away with, okay, this is our game plan, and this is what we know is probably going to happen, and this is how we're going to like build in our recipe for our family to navigate through it.
Wow.
So anytime in that season, and then in the postpartum season, give yourself 2 weeks after you have a baby before you panic. Unless you are having hallucinations, unless you're struggling with like what's real, what's not real, or you literally like feel like you're gonna die or you might like harm yourself or someone else, those are the extreme situations. Reach out for help right away.
Mm-hmm.
But the first 2 weeks that's called like the baby blue season. And that's the season where our hormones are like tanking drastically. And then they level out a bit after that. And so if you panic thinking, oh my gosh, this is my future, this is my life now, just know like give yourself 2 weeks, have your support system come in strong in those 2 weeks and like
Mm-hmm.
see how it is. And after those 2 weeks, if the struggles are still as significant, reach out for help.
Can
Yeah.
I ask a question? So a lot of this is
Yeah.
including like a support system and having like other people around you in this postpartum. For some women, I find that when we work with them, it's hard for them to almost look outside of their body and see what's actually happening. Like think of watching themselves in a movie, right? And so they're kind of stuck in this, I like to call it a tornado of thoughts and feelings and emotions and negativity. How would you recommend that like the support person address maybe some anxiety, some depression, some obsessive thoughts, some concerning dialogue that's happening without minimizing and or
Yeah.
exacerbating? You know what I mean? Because
Mm-hmm.
it's like
Yes.
when your husband, you feel like I'm ugly, and your husband's like, you're hot. And I'm like, well, okay, that doesn't solve what I'm feeling. It's also hard to tell, like from my experience, it's very challenging to have the conversation with some women of like, this is not good. Like, this is actually really unhealthy. And I understand you're trying your best and you think like in 2 years from now, this is all gonna work out. But how you're behaving right now is really frightening. So I want to know from you, like, how do you even have that conversation with somebody?
Yeah, I want to
Yeah.
piggyback on that too.
Uh-huh.
And then also for that person, how do they address kind of numbing and disconnection
Oh,
as
yeah.
well?
Absolutely. So if somebody's listening to this who's already in that season and they don't have time to have that conversation beforehand,
Mhm.
then we have to approach it from a place of empathy. So there's 2 ways in my brain. As a therapist, I was treating just like maternal mental health struggles as a coach and a therapist. And I realized like, we've got to get ahead of this. And that's where I created my program, the Empowered First Year, because we have to help prevent it. And so, if you're pregnant and you haven't gotten to that stage of having these big emotional struggles, um, talk about it. Talk about the taboo things before they might happen so that you already have language around it. You already have a plan together. You're already giving the quote unquote permission to your partner
Mm-hmm.
that you feel like you would need in that time. And if it's too late for that and you're already in the position and you're hearing this and you recognize, like, that's my partner right now, come from empathy, sitting down with them and being able to truly like say how much you love them and you appreciate them, and you're recognizing that this season is so hard for all of us, but it seems to be additional, like there's this additional layer of heaviness, or it's hard for me to see you not get out of bed for a day, or we've got to open up the blinds in the house. And I'm worried because a symptom of wanting to like close yourself in or not go out into the world, like that's a symptom of depression. Or like you are on, like for me, I was on hyper alert, right? Like the obsessive compulsive intrusive thoughts were coming in fast, and they were in video form in my brain, right? Like a video reel playing of all the terrible, horrible things that could happen to my baby. And then I would like hyper protect my surroundings, right? Like I would like, we're not going to go do that. It's not safe. Or we need to buy this immediately and fix this area of the house. Or we need, like, my brain was just, and being able to have a partner that can recognize like, wow, I know it's stressful and you care so much about our baby. I do too. I want to keep them safe too. But this is like past a place of what I think is normal. And there's a lot of people out there that can support and help you through this. Like, can we talk about what that would look like?
I interrupt this episode to bring you our August promo, which is $1 for 1 month of the Mindset and Movement fitness training app. This app has been designed for anyone, whether you're a beginner, advanced, whether you have access to a full gym, or maybe you have dumbbells at home, or maybe you only have 20 minutes and you want to get a great workout in. If this is you, this app has been designed for you. The app includes 4-phase training programs. We have a 5-day split for someone who has access to a full gym. We have a 5-day split if someone has access to dumbbells. We have a 3-day body weight and band split if you want to start there. We have a 3-day time crunch dumbbell workout split if you're short on time. And we have core programs that you can add to any of the other programs. The nice thing about this app is that every month the workout change. The workouts are going to be designed based on the previous workout, so they're well phased so that you get the results that you desire. You also get access to our community forum of like-minded individuals to share your experience and share your workouts and your success. You'll also get access to a variety of resources that the Mindset of Matter includes in this program. So if you're ready to get in the best shape of your life, click the link below to get $1 for 1 month. And here's the great thing. After the first month, it's $29 per month. So you'll definitely want to partake in this. Now, back to the show.
Screeners are also available. So the Eidenberg screener is a postpartum depression scale that if you've ever had a baby, you've seen it. Hopefully you have seen it. Providers typically introduce it to you at your 6-week checkup. Pediatricians are supposed to go through every time you go in at a milestone as a pediatrician. They're supposed to check the parents, screening that. I know that one's less common that they do, but that can give you a picture, an idea of what you're experiencing. I also have a Name It to Tame It quiz on my website under my freebie section where you can go in.
Praise Christina's love.
I love it. I love it.
Loves a good catchy phrase.
And you can pick like, okay, yes, this answer all the questions in there. They're very relatable. And the results will tell you like, okay, these are some symptoms of depression. These are some symptoms of anxiety. These are some symptoms of trauma that might be coming up. And then if you're tested, if like you take that quiz and you're like, whoa, that gives me some insight on what to do. There's resources and action steps to take on where to go from there.
And what kind of
that's awesome.
resources and action steps? Like, is it always to go to a therapist? Is it medication? Like what role?
Good question.
Yeah. Like how do we get better?
Oh my gosh, I love this question because I believe there's so much more we can do than your provider will often tell you.
Yes.
Providers say talk therapy and medication management, which are proven beneficial options, but not everybody wants the same things and not everything works for everyone. And so I believe in the need to have more options than just traditional talk therapy and medication management. And that's how I went through my own healing journey. I decided I don't want talk therapy. Like I'm a therapist. I know what benefit I can get from it. Like I understand CBT is beneficial, but I don't want that right now. And I don't want medication. And so I decided to talk to a functional medicine doctor and supported healing my gut to heal my mind. And I realized, and this is at the root for a lot of women in the postpartum season, we are extremely deficient in so many vitamins and minerals because our body is using so much energy to heal from birth and to feed our baby if we're breastfeeding.
Yeah.
Yeah. that we are not getting what we need. And we're not being told by our providers, our typical providers, our gynecologists, what vitamins and supplements we should be taking. They're not testing us. We go in at our 6-week checkup, they're not doing labs to find out. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to start from the inside out. And I went to a functional medicine doctor. She's phenomenal here in the Valley. And I tested everything. And I realized I was anemic. Hello, depression, no energy. Like, of course, that makes sense. Vitamin D deficiency, which often causes feelings of depression as well. Vitamin A deficiency. I was deficient in like almost everything. And then the big one that made the difference was magnesium for me. My body was in so much pain. I couldn't, like, my legs would shake as I slept, right? Like they wouldn't stop shaking. And magnesium, it made such the difference for me. So yeah, you can heal your body to heal your mind. You can also, like, I focused on energy work as well. So I'm a Reiki practitioner now because of my journey. Experiencing Reiki is really, really powerful for me. Kundalini yoga was really powerful, how I moved my body with intention and repetition. And it allowed me to drop into meditation and calm my monkey mind because my body was doing so much while I was meditating. Physical movement in ways that feel safe for your body. After birth, it can feel scary, especially if you've had a C-section, to move your body again. And so being able to build up to not exercise, but moving, right? How do we move our body again just to feel good? There's also ways, I know so many people who have done healing around like breath work. I did holotropic breath work, which was really powerful for me. Stimulating your vagus nerve through polyvagal breathing was really powerful for me. But these are things that I teach in coaching. I also implement into my therapy sessions. Around how do we regulate the nervous system? How do we look around us and find ways to support our sense of just connection outside of the moment we're in, right? Moving our body connects us to the world around us. Meditation connects us spiritually. I know spirituality is actually a big factor for people in healing the postpartum season, trusting in something bigger than who they are or what life is right now, that there's a bigger picture, that it's going to get better from here on out, can give a lot of support. So there's so much that we don't really talk about in our society that can help us heal in this season of life.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was going to say,
well, and
Kristen,
everything you're
like you got a
talking
lot
about,
to say.
everything you're talking about, in our own program, we actually provide a lot of those resources for our clients, because oftentimes a lot of our clients are living in their sympathetic nervous system because of chronic stress and trauma and, relational issues and so on and so forth. So we already implement a lot of that. It's interesting though, because what you're saying is specifically around, we are barely even touching the top of the iceberg of like postpartum and in the guise of depression, right? But people don't realize, and I did, even as a therapist, realize the anxiety and OCD part of it. And the kind of funny thing is, and Amanda, you are going to crack up when I tell you this, I learned that on Vanderpump Rules. So one of the girls has postpartum OCD.
Yeah.
And she talks about it on this reality show. And I was like, oh, that's interesting, because the funny part of that is I used to work for an organization that did an OCD IOP for teenagers. I was not a part of that. I did their eating disorder IOP. However,
what's an IOP?
I don't intensive outpatient program.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's just so interesting. Not interesting. It's so eye-opening and interesting for women to realize, like, this is something that you need to look for, that even myself, I can clearly say as a clinician myself, was not aware of, and I think that's really important. But coming back to the techniques, it's really that groundingness, getting into that social engagement aspect of your parasympathetic nervous system. And really the way I see it from a body perspective is, you're in this body that's out of your control. I feel like Amanda's talked about, there's these things happening that you you've said it. You know they're supposed to happen a certain way, but there's no kind of just one road you drive down. Everyone's pregnancy experience is different. And then we go into the, postpartum, and now we need to reconnect back with this body too. So a lot of what you're talking about is just that connection back
Yes.
to self, which I think is really important for people to recognize. So I love
Yes.
that.
And to add on to that, and I should have mentioned this before, but the biggest factor that supports your mental health is community that you feel is supportive and aligned and listens to you. So,
Mhm.
not just people and warm bodies, but aligned community. Having a true support system that you physically feel is supportive can immensely shift your trajectory for your mental health.
Yeah, I
Mhm.
would compound that statement further of from my experience working with clients who are in this phase, whether it's the prenatal, I'm thinking about getting pregnant, I am pregnant, and then postpartum, is I notice a difference with my postpartum clients who have this sense of community like you're talking about, because they don't
Mhm.
feel so alone. And there's a certain business here in Phoenix, Scottsdale, that does like a motherhood support group. And the way they break it up is by when your baby's born. So for
Yes.
example, if my baby's gonna, do you know who I'm talking about? They're
Hmm.
called Modern Milk for anybody that's listening. So if my baby was gonna, what are we in? We're in July. If my baby was gonna be born in July, they would have a cohort of July, August babies. And what they do is essentially I think it's 8 weeks. I don't even think it's that long, maybe 4 weeks. I forget the duration, but you go weekly and you meet with moms who had the baby at that same time, and you get education through like therapy. They get education through pelvic health. They get education through nutrition and breastfeeding or however feeding modality you want. And my clients who have gone through it, the biggest thing they say is it's not necessarily like the education that they got when they were going to the class. It's that now they have a group text with women who are in the same phase, because it's different to say like, so I could text you and you've got a baby who's older than my baby would be. And sometimes I feel like when women reach out, it's like, oh, I remember that phase. You'll be fine. You just got to get through it. But as we're saying, it's like she doesn't feel fine right now.
Mhm.
And if she can hear from other women, like, oh my gosh, my baby's doing that too, like, here's some things that I did that worked, you're in the same, like, literally week of life together.
Yes.
And so that
Hmm.
sense of community is what they say is like, again, the money was an additional cost. So we are talking from a point of benefit there or advantage. But in the education was great, but it's not so much that, it's what happened afterwards that they got from it that
Yes.
they find such value in.
Yes. So in the Empowered First Year program, we do it in cohorts so
Oh,
that they
okay.
have parents that they're in weekly calls with, that they're building relationships with, that they can stay in contact with throughout the hard times. And it's the people who you can have on a text group in 2 o'clock in the morning because you're up feeding and you know they're probably up feeding too.
Right.
And you can literally just like word vomit into a text chain and know that somebody's there and they're going to reciprocate or respond to you. That can
Mhm.
be so powerful. We're in a loneliness epidemic here right now. Our attorney general has said a couple years ago, like official warning that we are in a loneliness epidemic. And in Europe, they did a study on moms, and 95% of moms report feeling lonely.
95?
Mhm.
95, almost everyone
Yeah,
reports
that's
Yeah.
like, is
feeling
it the 5% who
lonely.
don't have children? The
I
one.
know, right? They're all moms though. The study was with all moms. But so I
Mhm.
think it's so powerful to talk about like how are people getting connected to community. And I have an Empowered Mamas Club, which is a weekly online community. And those moms have built friendships that have like withstanded years. There's been moms in there that have been in the program for years because of how
Mhm.
powerful it is to actually get someone that you can be raw and honest and real
Yeah.
about what you're going through, not feel judged, feel understood. You can say the feelings that you have, whether it's the depression and the anxiety, the OCD, the trauma, you can speak about it and know that the people in the room with you on the Zoom room, they all get it. And it's like this safe
Mhm.
space to not have to like harbor these thoughts and these feelings that just snowball inside you and get bigger and bigger and feed on each other. If you don't let
Mhm.
that out and you don't feel heard and supported around it, it can become real toxic.
Right. And that's what I hear
Absolutely.
too for women. Like they necessarily, so like what Christina had said in the beginning of little T trauma and big T trauma, they
Mhm.
didn't necessarily have like the worst birth experience ever, but there were things that happened that didn't align with what they had envisioned. and they come home with baby, like they're relatively healthy, overall, baby's relatively
Mhm.
okay. They've got a good support system, but they feel this immense sense of like guilt because they still don't feel right, whether it's in their body or emotionally, physically, mentally, hormonally. And it's almost like, I forget, sugar coated because it's like, well, you have a baby and you're okay. Like everything turned out fine. Like everybody's alive. And so I think it's important, like you're talking about these groups, to say, like, yeah, everything was okay, but it still wasn't okay for me. Like from a
Mhm.
doctor's order, like on their chart notes, it was fine. But that doesn't mean like I walked out of there going, yeah, I felt great after that experience. And so I think
Yeah.
it's great that you have this space that you can offer women to say, yeah, even though everybody's healthy, it doesn't mean we're internally at our full health that we want to be.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. When you talk about trauma in that way, I think it's eye-opening. And I like to say, like, when you birth your baby, you go from literally like growing your baby inside you, feeling their kick, like being like attuned to them inside your body, right? Like you are one, it feels like, right? And then you birth your baby and they're no longer inside you, and your body is contracting back into to not previous shape. It's contracting back.
Mhm.
Oftentimes you feel phantom kicks inside you. You feel the things that resemble the kicks before, even though the baby's not in there. Your body is remembering the memory of your baby being inside you. And even
Mhm.
that is your body processing this loss, right? Whether you want to
Mhm.
label it as trauma, I don't care what people label it as. Your body feels it in that way. And
Mhm.
emotionally, we feel it too. When all of a sudden we're like, man, like I have 15 doctor's appointments in the next 2 weeks just to feed you. Like, and
Mhm.
this feels like you had everything you need while I like worked before, right? And now there's this separation, and I miss the ease of you being inside and the safety of you being inside. And that's a beautiful thing. Your baby's in your arms. It's a beautiful thing. And you get to grieve that transition that you're going through,
Mhm.
that separation that you're going through.
Yeah, it's an ambiguous loss. It's this thing that
Yeah.
people don't realize can have such a deep effect on us. We have a lot of issue or a lot of scenarios in our lives that reflect that in a variety of ways. I think of even something silly, like a dad who always dreams of like having the son who will play football and this, that, the other thing, and then they have daughters, right? These are those things where we have this is obviously much more intense than that, but people don't realize that there is a sense of loss, even if something is still gained, or we have, as Amanda said, that child in the end. And we need to allow for that space to grieve, to again reconnect to this new normal in our life,
Yeah.
right? That we've never experienced before. And giving moms time to do that, I feel like there's such a timeline on things, specifically mothers who work, that all is well and even in the medical field, all is well after 6 weeks, or how long is uh the time away usually? Do you guys know on
Maybe
It
average?
12 weeks.
depends.
Yeah, there is
If
no,
you get short-term disability leave, it
yeah,
can be 12 weeks
yeah, or
if you get that.
Oh,
FMLA. There's,
yeah,
I would say essentially none, because if you are working and your income is part of the household income, like you got to get
right,
back, right? So there's that
right.
weight of not only caring and nurturing for this new thing that you have no idea what to happen for, whether it's your first, second, third, or fifth baby, but then also your contribution to the household has changed as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right. And that timeline of like, oh, you need to have it all nicely packed up. Oh, and also you've been cleared to go work out too. So you should also do that. And then we have all this pressure on, oh, you should also lose the baby weight. And we need to give mothers time. We need to give them space. We need to hold space for them. I'm so glad that you offer that. I think this is something that the women listening may not even realize is out there. Which whether and I do have a question. I'll circle back to that about how people can obviously get to you, but it's just we need to just everyone needs to calm the fuck down and give mom some
Yes.
space.
I think we live in a culture, in a society where we are hustlers, right? Like
Mhm.
we embody this this like gold star standard that if I am independent and I am like able to go and support myself and support my family, like I've made it in life. And that's taught to us from childhood, right? Like when you turn 18 or once you graduate college, like this is, you've got to have your shit together. And the
Right.
reality is when that programming doesn't go away when you become a mom. And then
Mm-hmm.
all of a sudden you have the timeline of like 6 weeks, I'm supposed to be healed and ready to have sex. No, like I was sewn up and broke my tailbone personally. I was like, nobody's going down there for
Yeah.
a while. Like it still hurts to walk at 6 weeks. Like,
Right.
and then
Right.
like the transition back to work, I just have to say, America is so far behind. I think we are like one of four, it was like four or seven developed countries in the entire world that doesn't have any time for parents after they have children. There's no laws around it in America, where every other developed country, except for I think we're like one of four out there, do have that. And so it's completely the message that that gives us
Mm-hmm.
is ridiculous. I was sitting in a musicology class last week. I
Mm-hmm.
go and speak at some of their classes, and
Mm-hmm.
these two moms were talking, and they're like, "Yeah, I go back next week. My baby just started like recognizing and smiling, and it's starting to get fun. And now I have to hand them off to somebody else and go back to work." And my heart was just
Mm-hmm.
like, "Oh,
Yeah.
wow." Oh, and I
Yeah.
could go on for days about that.
Yeah, I'm curious because you had mentioned it could be many, many weeks, maybe even months after you've had the
Yeah.
baby that some of these symptoms come in. And I'm curious to like how much of that contributes to this. Maybe would you call that what's the word I'm looking for? Like delayed postpartum, or is it just considered postpartum?
If it's within the first year after giving birth, it's considered postpartum.
Gotcha. So I'm
Mhm.
curious. I mean, that obviously in my brain, I would think that would even, make that harder on the mother. And there's all this guilt and
Yes.
shame or whatever it is. So I imagine that compounds on them and causes more
Yeah.
struggle.
And it really highlights what you spoke to before around like when we numb or we disassociate, going back to work really feeds into that. Like we
Mm,
literally have to separate from ourselves biologically what we feel called. Like at work, I knew when my son was hungry because my boobs let down. And I'm like,
mm,
oh my God, like I'm supposed to be with him right now. And
hmm.
like my body's telling me to feed him. And instead I gotta go pump and stick it in the office fridge. Like
Right.
it's
Like this
so
is not normal.
fascinating. No, but we physically separate and we shove it down. We disassociate. We put our work hat on. And for me, the work hat felt good. Guess what? It was familiar. I was freaking good
Mm,
at it. Like it
right.
was a place where I could be a part of my identity that I felt like, um, I don't know, like I could physically do where motherhood was hard and I was learning so much and I didn't have the gold star yet. So it felt really
Mm.
hard. And there's like this, it just feeds in to the disassociation. It feeds it.
Yeah, it feeds into your beliefs too about your worth, is what I'm hearing from
Mm-hmm.
you. So I'm a high achiever.
Mm-hmm.
I feel very uncomfortable here.
Yes.
So I'm going to put even more effort into this over here because I know that
Yes.
that's where I get the gold star and we hustle and we grind. And that's going to turn into its own issue, not only with you, but with your child after a certain
Mm-hmm.
point of continuing to do that. So I think it's important for us to
Yes.
recognize what are our self-defeating beliefs and or the things that we have used our external validation in our lives, because that's probably going to be the thing that we turn to make ourselves feel better, but in all reality that can become its own set of issues and then they end up in our program.
Yeah, what I keep thinking about
Yes.
is the toxic resilience. That
Right.
keeps chiming in my head when you guys are talking about this is like these high achieving women and I'm doing great. I'm resilient. I'm great. I'm great. I'm great. And now all of my stuff is not taken care of, but look at what I am, and it's like, yeah, but
Hmm.
your hair's falling out. Your relationship is strained. You're frustrated with your kids. You don't understand them. You're separated from your body. You don't even know when you're hungry, when you're not. And I feel like it's important to note that it starts somewhere, right? And so it starts in childhood. There's start like little bits and pieces that accumulate there. And then it starts as we go through school and there's bits and pieces there. And then it starts with how we perceive ourselves and our bodies. And then it starts with marriage. And then it starts with postpartum. And then lo and behold, you've got a whole cake made out of bits and pieces of your life. And now it's this like chaotic thing that I feel like a lot of women, and I don't want to put blame on anybody, but they point to postpartum as the part that ruined it all or what. And I know those are not very good words to use or very empathetic words, but they often use the postpartum period as this way of defining how they feel now. Whereas when you start to unpack it, especially like in our program and working with clients, and I'm sure you experience this too with your clients, is when you start to unpack it, you're like, well, this was really kind of before this period. Like these little
Yeah,
bits.
like postpartum's where the cake crashed down.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah, yeah. We
that's
dropped the
where it
cake
all
on the
came
floor.
from.
Yeah. And I
Yeah.
think it's important for women to recognize that because often they'll like again point the finger at that and it's like no, like you did not feel great about your body before you got pregnant. So I don't know why all of a sudden you're expecting to feel great and get back on track and start exercising within 6 weeks and get this post-baby body back when you really didn't appreciate.
Which we don't support, by the way.
Yeah, no, we don't at all.
No
But
bounce back. Yeah, thank
like,
you. Thank you for saying
yeah,
that. Thank
no,
you.
we
Yeah,
do.
we do not support that.
No, we are very like I at 6 for me, I'm like if they got cleared by the OBGYN, I'm like, have you seen a pelvic floor physical therapist? Because that's what I want to know. Have you seen
How's
them?
your sleep?
How's your sleep? Are you breastfeeding like you
Mhm,
talked about? Are you eating enough right now?
mhm,
Because as you talked
mhm.
about, we get to postpartum and we immediately want to cut calories because we want to lose the weight. And that was kind of their reaction before when they were uncomfortable in their body. Like, I'll just eat less and then I'll lose weight. And it's like, well, what is so uncomfortable in your body that you're trying to escape? What are you trying to do? Because you've repeated this cycle over and over, but now again, postpartum is just the dropping of the cake, like you referenced.
Mhm.
Yes, it's so
Yeah.
true. I think the buildup, like when I reflect on my life and a lot of the people I serve, like I think that this is a generalized statement, but there's so many experiences that I've had where high achieving or type A personality women, when they experience postpartum, they're the ones where the cake's falling down because they're surprised that they would have these experiences. They're not used to feeling depressed. They're not used to feeling like they can't physically go do something or they can't even think of the thing that they would go do. Like that's not their MO, right? Usually they have the laundry list like 10 miles long of all the things they're going to do and how they're
Mhm.
going to do it and they're checking it off along the way. And there's a large part of us in our society, America, because of how we're trained as humans, where we are that high achieving women. We are the women who feel like we need to like grind the hustle culture, right? Or the
Mhm.
boss mom like
Mhm.
mindset that really pushes us forward. And so I
Mhm.
love how you described that, Amanda. I love how you described like the ingredients that build up. And I have a client I work with in therapy who was saying, like, I've never thought of myself as having anxiety before motherhood, but I think my anxiety was just serving me really well before. Like it
Mhm.
was helping me be really strong in work and I was rewarded for that. And because I was rewarded for that, I felt fulfilled. And so
Mhm.
there's like, oh, it was functional before. And now
Mhm.
it's at a place where it's not.
Absolutely. As you were talking, I just imagined someone who's numbed and numbed and numbed throughout whatever numbing agent, whether that be the grind, the hustle, food, whatever that is, and
Yeah.
the postpartum experience. And I don't have children. I've had a hysterectomy, so I've never experienced it, but I imagine that is so overwhelming to the system that dichotomy, that change in control, like you said, versus out of control, and the amount of feeling out of control, specifically for someone who is type A, who is checklist quality control. I put my mind to it. I do well. That can be just debilitating. Debilitating
Yeah.
is the word I think of because it's like when I tried to learn how to snowboard. I just couldn't figure it out. That's another story. Amanda knows my. I would call her and be like, I can't do this.
Like,
That's my experience, guys. Everyone listening's like, Christina, stop.
let the snowboarding go.
I'm never gonna let it go. I'm gonna do it.
It's really,
Oh,
Anywho,
I
one thing I wanted to
also,
ask you. Oh, go ahead.
yeah, I also want to say like, so many of us feel like we've done something wrong or it's our fault when we're experiencing mental health struggles. And the reality is that there's 1 in 5 women who are experiencing postpartum or I should just say perinatal mood and anxiety disorders through pregnancy or postpartum. 1 in 5. And those are
Wow.
of the ones who report it.
Right.
So we know that people don't always report. The statistics during COVID said 1 in 3. 1 in 3 birthing people would experience this. 1 in 10 partners experience perinatal mood anxiety disorders. And I want to say that because these statistics are telling us in our country that we have a maternal mental health crisis on our hands with very little conversation around it, very little preparation. I don't know how many people are talked to about this while they're pregnant. I never was. It was never a thing that was discussed. And what was discussed was my 6-week checkup. I got handed the Eidenberg scale. I checked it off and handed it back. It sat down on the counter. I lied on it because I asked them ahead of time, what is this for? And they said it's to it's to identify if you need
Yes.
medication or you need to go to a therapist. And I already knew those weren't the routes I wanted to go. So I was like, well, then you don't need that information. They didn't even look at it anyways, though. So that's the amount of awareness that there is for us going through this right now. And the really scary thing is in Arizona, our maternal mortality rates are through the roof. They have increased every single year. And the reason why moms are dying is because of their mental health. That's the leading reason happening later
Wow.
in the postpartum season. Like
That's so
that's just
important.
earth
Wow.
shattering.
It is. It
So we
is.
have like a huge crisis on our hands that we're trying we're trying to treat and get ahead of. And so thank you guys for having me on the podcast and talking about this. Like we have to make it not taboo.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We are all female forward and whether it's pregnancy, perimenopause, menopause, thyroid issues,
Teens,
PCOS,
your
teens, teenagers, your period being abnormal. We don't have the support
no.
Yes.
anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
we are on a mission to get
Well, and
that.
finding
But
that
I love
support, like
that.
I think from each of our own experience, and like is really challenging to have someone who's going to listen to you and be like, okay,
Yeah.
I believe you. Because even like, for example, we've talked about this before, where clients go and they get their blood work done, and the PCP's like, blood work's normal, you're good, and they're like, and we're screaming at them, you need to find a new doctor. You need to find somebody that's
because
gonna,
they don't feel good.
yeah, because you still don't feel good, like you still don't feel right. You're still like if like this anxiety that you're feeling, this impending doom with your children or these obsessive intrusive thoughts, like that's it. It's okay, but we've got to get help. But finding that help is sometimes really, really hard. And
Yeah.
not only because it's like the thought of like it's like going to therapy for the first time. Finding the therapist is really hard, but then now you've got to date a therapist to make sure they're the right fit for you too, or that they're aligned with what you know what I mean?
Mm.
Like your
True.
values. And so it's just, I think it's so important that we promote people like you and Dr. Julie and all the other Olenka and Dr.
Mhm.
Kakar and Megan, all the people that we're having on and interviewing, because I think so many people get jaded by their experience thinking like this just is there isn't anybody for me. And it's like,
Mhm.
here's someone for you that offers multiple opportunities in each transition of your life of this pregnancy journey and postpartum journey that understands what you're feeling, has their own experience, and then has support tools for you and support groups for you as well.
Love it. Yeah. I wanted to say, because we didn't really list them off, like for our listeners, what should they be paying attention to
Ah,
so
yeah.
that, yeah, that's probably important to talk about.
It
We
is.
haven't made it this far, but
Yes.
here's how to know.
We're just on a roll. Okay. Now you
Yes.
guys can hear
So
the takeaways.
yeah, in the layman's terms, like, is it hard for you to get out of bed? To outside of like physical pain, emotionally, is it hard for you to get out of bed, get out of the house? Is it daunting for you to have to go to the grocery store to go be entertained? Do you feel less interest in activities that you were once interested in? You might have had a million hobbies before, and now you just kind of feel like you can't name a single thing you enjoy. Have you lost interest in things that did bring you joy before? Like, food can be one of them, right? Like eating brings me no joy now. Like I don't like you might feel like I don't know, like I'm putting this in my mouth to make milk, right? Like you
Mm-hmm.
feel completely disconnected. Do you feel like you are what we call disassociating? Do you feel like your body's just going through the movements and your brain is elsewhere? You're not able to be present. Do you have racing thoughts? Do you feel extra worried and concerned where you can't quiet those thoughts? What we call intrusive thoughts or thoughts that come in and they are like uninvited. You weren't thinking about it, but all of a sudden, like, bam, it sidelines you. And there's this negative thought that comes in. And those can be thoughts of scary things happening to your child. They can be thoughts of you doing scary things to your child.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, I want to say you are not your thoughts. Just because you think them doesn't mean anything about you. You are not your thoughts. You are the observer of your thoughts. And so when
Mm-hmm.
you recognize and you observe yourself having those thoughts, it means nothing about you other than your thoughts are being intrusive right now, which is extremely common with anxiety in the postpartum season. And it's something that you can receive help around. It can get better. You're not destined to always have these thoughts come in your head. Also, the obsessive compulsive nature is not it's not commonly the traditional thing you would think about it. It's not like having to
Not
flip the
checking the
light switch
lights.
7 times or like that's
See how we both
usually
went there
not.
to that example?
I was like, okay.
Yes. So it's usually not how OCD shows up in the postpartum season. It's more, a lot of people express that it's around the thoughts. So they obsess over the thoughts. Their thoughts are compulsive and they don't have control over them. It can be how when you change your baby's diaper and you're like terrified for a second, like all of a sudden everything's going to fall apart on the changing table and you're scared. Like that can be compulsive thoughts coming in for you. It's these thoughts that keep returning that you can't seem to get away. And oftentimes people create so compulsions, like people create compulsive behavior to try and quiet the thoughts. And so
Mm-hmm.
then they'll like check the changing table a lot to make sure it's sturdy before they put their baby on it because the thought keeps coming in and then they feel like they have to quiet the thought. So they're doing that behavior. So if you see behaviors around it, it's usually them trying to mitigate or it's you trying to mitigate danger or threat in some way. So it can come out like that as well. And then physical symptoms, panic disorder can be very common. And in panic disorder, you have a lot of like these physical symptoms where you literally think you're going to die. Like you can't get another breath in, you can't breathe deep enough, your heart's racing so much, like your body's pounding, you're sweating, like you're throbbing, like parts of your body feels like it's throbbing, and you literally think you are going to die. That is a panic attack. And it's
Mm-hmm.
a common anxiety symptom or a category under anxiety and perinatal mood anxiety struggles.
Mm.
That's a pretty well-rounded list to watch out for.
Yes,
Yeah. I didn't
absolutely.
say the most, so the least common are things that we would put under the category of psychosis. But they're also the most dangerous. And if you have any of these experiences that I'm about to list, you need to call a professional, call your doctor right away. It doesn't mean you're a bad person. It means your brain's playing tricks on you. And there's proven modalities to treat it, but leaving it untreated can put you at risk and your baby at risk, like your lives at risk. It's one of the most common struggles that lead to some of the maternal mortality rates that we have. And this list of things under psychosis is seeing things that aren't there and you're realizing that they're not there, hearing things that aren't there and you're realizing that they're not there, tactile hallucinations, like feeling things like somebody's touched you, but nobody's there. Or someone's touching you and you think somebody's there, but you're like, they're not there. Nobody else is seeing them. I have somebody on my podcast that's going to be airing soon that experienced this. And it was like seeing somebody attacking their child. And when they went to go fight that person off, they weren't there. And their brain like played that trick on them, right? Also, paranoia can like fall under this category. So thinking that you are in danger, your baby's in danger, thinking that your baby is evil or a demon reincarnated is a common one. Where you like see, you feel, and you believe this so deeply. If you have people in your life who feel that, like it's an immediate call for help, to support that.
Yeah.
Those are
And just
very like not common at all, but
right.
I want to know.
Well, and there's in all states, you guys can Google. I mean, I know this is in the United States, like a crisis line that
Yeah.
can be helpful for you. I know we have one in Arizona and in other states.
Yeah.
So,
There's a national line you can call 988
mhm. Mhm.
is one that you can call for help. PSI, Postpartum Support International. If you go to postpartum.net, that homepage has a list of crisis lines. One is
Awesome.
specifically for the perinatal season. So if you're pregnant or you're in your postpartum season.
Love, 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 love.
Love. That was awesome. So because with the time we have left, you touched on your programs throughout our call. Or actually, let me ask this,
Well,
Christina,
yeah.
anything that you want to talk about more? Or are you
No,
okay?
no. I want to know
I
kind
want
of
to,
about the programs.
yeah, I want you to tell us and the audience about your different programs, how they can find you, ways families can work with you as well.
Yes. Okay. So you can find me on my website or on Instagram. You can type in oneworldempowered.com. And that has all my services on the website. I also have a podcast called Empower to Heal, which is all stories of the second season is all motherhood, and the first season is stories of how people found the power within themselves to heal through their struggles. I offer therapy services in Arizona via telehealth. If anybody is struggling and they resonate with what's shared today, feel free to reach out to me. You can message me at Dina, Dena, at oneworldempowered.com. I have the weekly coaching program that is on Zoom. That's called the Empowered Mamas Club, and it's a community healing group. And then we have the course. The next cohort is launching in a month for the Empowered Year, the Empowered First Year course. And so I have a wait list that you can join on the website.
Awesome.
Awesome. We love this. We love
Yes.
it. We always want to, anything that's going to empower the women that are out there or our listeners who, can share this with other people. We want to make sure that we are giving them the info. And I love this because, like I said, this is an area that we have to begin to shed more light on. And, popular culture, I do see more people talking about it in popular culture. However, it's not enough. So I'm glad we had this conversation today.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Yes.
Time.
Awesome.
Yes. Thank you both so much for believing in this and creating a space for this. I appreciate it.
Of course.
Absolutely. Well, if you guys like this information, we will put all of Dina's information in the show notes so you can see the links there. If you want to continue to get more info on Mindset of Matter coaching, you can find the Clarity Call link to set up a call with Coach Amanda and myself. Coach Amanda will be launching her cohort for the Mindset of Mommies, which would be an extension. You can actually do both of these cohorts at the same time, where you're talking about postpartum, pregnancy and postpartum nutrition and exercise and mindset work. Also, if you want to follow us, you can find us on Instagram at Mindset of Matter Coaching or fitbyamanda.az and or fitbyamanda.az. And other than that, you'll find this recording on YouTube if you want to see all of our beautiful faces. And lastly, if for some reason you did not take anything from this podcast, which I'm sure you took a lot from it, I want you to take away one little thing.
What you say in the mind.
You see in the mirror. Goodbye.